An example often given is the Greco-Roman world, where a Greek or a Roman encounters someone, say, from the Near East, and they see that they have a god, and this god actually has many of the attributes of their god. So suddenly they say, well, you know, our God is your God and your God is our God. And it's seen as if it's, if you will, ignoring many of the differences, and once again, bringing these different traditions together in a way they never should have, right? Really, in a sense, putting a round peg into a square hole. I think what's important to actually consider here is there's a difference between, is something syncretistic or is it addressing prior truth claims? What if a movement, even in the case of the Greco-Roman world, is not actually stating, well, let's ignore the actual differences, let's just completely ignore them and just crush them together because there are some sort of vague similarities, but is rather saying, well, wait a minute, let's actually take a look at your tradition and see really beyond, if you will, the idols themselves or the external outward forms, if really there is a heritage that we are both trying to communicate, where there is some common origin lying behind the scenes, and that we may be simply making differences that do not need to be stressed, or even in some cases, acknowledged. It's important to look at this. I myself have had individuals say to me that actually the Baha'i Faith is a mere syncretism. And it is expressed in the sense that, like I said, you're taking things that should never be together, and you're just sort of slapping them all together. They never really should be. Syncretism is an accusation that has been thrown at Islam traditionally. In these two passages of the Quran, it's stating those who believe within the Jewish scriptures, the Quran, the Christians, and the Sabians, a very enigmatic reference, and any of those who believe in the last day and work righteousness. There's another passage of the Quran where it says, those who believe in God and in the last day, and that he hath sent prophets. Now, in a sense, why isn't this a syncretism between Judaism, Christianity, Sabianism, and, for example, let's say Zoroastrianism? Is it actually syncretism, or is it in fact simply claiming that these were true prior expressions, which have a, if you will, an original source that is divine and that has been expressed in different ways throughout history, in a progressive chain of messengers? Which one? Syncretism, or addressing prior truth claims and the unity of religion? Christianity. Equally with Christianity, it has been claimed, and could be claimed, that on the surface this is a syncretic faith. Why would we say this? For one, because it actually addresses the claims of Ezekiel, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Moses, Noah, Abraham. There is a whole series of traditions that actually exist before Jesus Christ shows up. But in addition to this, and I'm just offering this for consideration, we see terms that are used within the Greek New Testament, not a Hebrew work, that actually come directly from Greek philosophy. For example, the Stoic concept of the Logos, a divine principle that lies beyond the world, that is in some sense both the ground of what is true and what is good. Equally so, within the New Testament, we see, for example, three figures show up at the cradle of Jesus Christ. The three magi, commonly referred to as the three wise men. These individuals, it seems, are clearly, if one looks into it, Zoroastrian priests. The magi themselves are an expression of Zoroastrianism, and then when we turn to Christianity, we see a series of doctrines which seem particularly Zoroastrian. We see this idea of Satan, this ultimate dark force that is pulling against humankind towards that which is evil. But this, if you look into Zoroastrianism, which predates the Christian religion, looks like Ahriman or Angramanyu, this dark force that is actually tempting humankind. Equally as well, we find within the Buddhist scriptures the tempting of the Buddha by Mara the Destroyer, one who actually comes to the Buddha right when he is about to express his understanding of the Dharma, and offers him power, offers him riches, so that he will not express the Dharma to the world. A very similar theme which we actually find in the testing of Jesus Christ in the New Testament by Satan. And in both of these cases, Zoroastrianism and Buddhism both predate Christianity. Now the question is Christianity taking a syncretic form by attaching itself to Judaism, and then taking notions from Zoroastrianism into itself, even using a couple Zoroastrian players in the birth narrative of Jesus Christ? Is it actually bringing in themes from Buddhism, or is this actually archetypal motifs and expressions of prior truth claims, if you will, trails of crumbs that one could actually follow and find beauty elsewhere, the same light within different lamps? And again, from my own perspective, this is not a Stoic, Zoroastrian, Jewish syncretism. It is actually the revelation of God to humankind addressing many of these issues and trying to bring them into a synthesis to educate humankind, to raise them up to a new level where they can become one community and carry forward an ever-advancing civilization. For example, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, you find the story of Utnapishtim, where actually it uncannily is actually the same as the story of Noah. Now, I would argue, and may in the future, that actually when one looks at the story of Utnapishtim and the story of Noah and Noah's Ark, that this is actually addressing this story. It is addressing this theme or motif, just like the concept of the Logos in the New Testament is actually addressing a Greek philosophical notion. And actually pairing it, if you will, with a Jewish concept of divine wisdom, which, if anyone's interested, can be found in the Book of Wisdom, in the Apocrypha, or in chapter 8 of the Book of Proverbs. The question here is this once again a syncretism, or is it unifying a series of beliefs? If you will, bringing them back to their original intent and purpose, or using them to communicate a message, and at the same time healing the human consciousness? Or is it merely co-opting and syncretizing? Buddhist syncretism. There is no doubt in anyone's mind who actually reads the original Buddhist writings that Buddhism is taking figures from the Vedic pantheon, pulling them into the sutras of the Buddha, and treating them in a very innovative way. That you find therein Vayu, Agni, Varuna, Indra, the main gods from the Hindu pantheon, but they take on a different facet or a different flavor. You also have the doctrine of samsara pulled directly into Buddhism. In some sense, you have, I don't know if this is always obvious to people, but wholly Upanishadic thoughts, meaning concepts from Vedantic philosophy based upon the works called the Upanishads. They suddenly appear within Buddhism, but they seem to be adjusted. They seem to be, if you will, opened up. And sometimes they seem to directly contradict the expressions of the Upanishads and the Vedas. Now, is this a syncretism? Is this an individual that we refer to as the Buddha taking his own beliefs, grabbing some issues from the Vedas, from the Brahmanas, from the Upanishads, and just sort of mashing them together in a sort of Frankenstein way? Or once again, is this a diagnosis, a healing, a unifying, and a cleaning? Obviously for myself, I believe in each of these cases. It is the divine physician, a term used for the Baha'i manifestation of God, going into a culture, seeing the psychological, spiritual, and cultural challenges that are facing that culture, and using, if you will, the material of that culture to carry them forward and instilling it with a new wine, a new fragrance, a new spirit. If you will, a motif used within the Baha'i writings, taking the trees at the end of a winter and giving them new foliage. Hindu syncretism. The following are quotes from the Veda itself and from the Bhagavad Gita, and I will read them this time. They call him Indra, Mitra, Varuna, Agni, and he is heavenly, nobly winged Garutman. To what is one, sages give many a title. They call it Agni, Yama, Matarisan. This is a quote that's often used from the Rig Veda to point this out, that in a sense there are these different names for the Divine One that are attempts to express, if you will, the properties and qualities of the Divine Being itself. This is like, if you will, trying to even describe a car, where you're expressing its color, its shape, its form, and you're using all these different adjectives, all these different predicates to describe this one thing. It's not that each and any one of these is the whole thing. The car isn't redness, if you will. The car isn't its motor. The car isn't its drive shaft. But you're trying to describe through all these predicates, all these adjectives, the wholeness of what it is, and these in a sense being divine yet personified. And again, we will look at this in the future, but I would argue, and many already have, that Hinduism is not a polytheistic faith. But here we find another quote, and then the second quote is from the Bhagavad Gita. And again, pardon my pronunciation. I am the Self, O Gudakesha, seated in the heart of all creatures. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end of all beings. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of lights, I am the radiant sun. I am Marichi of the Maruts, and among the stars, I am the moon. There are several passages like this within the Gita, and this passage is actually quite a bit longer, and this is from chapter 10 of the Gita, where Krishna, in expressing himself to Arjuna, one of the other characters in the Bhagavad Gita, a principal Hindu devotional text, he explains himself to be the height of each of these different classes of being. The one power, divine power, the one beauty, the one love that is actually behind each of these manifestations. And of course, in this case, he even says of the mountains he is Meru, of the mountain ranges he is the Himalayas, meaning of all things he is the apex. Now, when one looks at this, is this actually a brushing aside of the differences? For example, between Shiva and Varuna? Is it trying to, if you will, Frankenstein them together and make them syncretic? Or is it actually coming out and saying, there is a divine spark here. These are the different attributes of my being. This is the different predicates one could actually apply to who I am. This is actually how individuals have attempted to communicate me to mankind at their level through a diagnosis and a remedy. Which one of these is it? Is it actually syncretism, or is it unification? Should we, in fact, be anti-syncretic? Is it simply a policy that when we see people taking divergent things and bringing them together, that we should naturally oppose it? Isn't that a truth claim itself? It's interesting, this idea of syncretism, because I think we also find that we can make the claim against atheistic materialism. Is it syncretic? This may come across as a very strange notion, and it is one that we will look at in depth in the future on this site. Can we rationally maintain the ideas, the Platonic ideas, of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and at the same time claiming that we are living in a world of pure material matter? Can we say that human life itself has no purpose and no goal, no end to which it is supposed to express itself, and still claim that there are moral properties? That one is responsible, the term I use is beholden, to become an ethical being. But even barring an ethical being, is there a responsibility and a duty for humankind to actually seek knowledge, even to seek truth, to explore it? Can the notion of something being true, which sounds like a completely intangible property, actually even be kept within the worldview of atheistic materialism? These are at times complicated questions, and at times I think merely complicated because of the sophisticated attempts to answer them. I would ask that we put this on pause, but to consider for yourself. Is atheistic materialism itself a syncretism of a metaphysics of materialism, and at the same time, a grabbing of a tradition of humankind of culturation, of cultured minds, of the goals of being a noble being and of actually being a truth-seeking mind, and trying to mash them together? Or are there actually moral properties? Or is there in fact not a merely practical benefit to being rational, but is there an innate value hierarchy within these? Because if it is mere pragmatism, what if I don't find it useful to my ends? Again, I only throw this out there for your consideration, and this will be a topic we're going to go through quite in depth in the future.